Welcome, everyone, for another People Leaders podcast. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm going to have a discussion with Amos, who is a really experienced psychologist and master coach with the International Coaching Federation, which is the highest level of coaching accreditation available. So we are in good company. Amos's specialist areas are CEO and top team coaching. And even though this year it's really about the new and emerging leader, I thought this was going to be a really interesting discussion because new and emerging leaders are always looking at growing and thinking about the future. So from that perspective, they can see what CEOs and what top senior teams are really looking for their leaders, new and emerging, to actually step up into an area of leadership. Now, Amos has recently returned to Australia, so lucky us, with his family after 10 years working overseas. And he's been very fortunate to work for extended periods with influential individuals in the political and media arena in the UK. Now, his style is bold and transforming and really relational. And Amos applies a really relentless focus to delivery of outcomes, which, most people are really after. However, what he does do really well on top of that is ensuring that the process of that remains spontaneous, human, and fun. And who doesn't like fun, because that's when we start to open up. And a client recently described him as empathy with an edge. That's his approach. So welcome, Amos.
I might just leave now, Jen.
How you?
That's a great intro. Yeah.
No.
I don't think I'm going to be able to live up to that, but thank you.
Well, let's just see.
Let's see.
I'm
Let's
sure we
see.
will. And I really like that description of empathy with an edge. And can we just start with that? Because a lot of
Sure.
people talk about empathy, and I think just having those two as a counterbalance. Can you tell me why that's important and how you see it done well?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fundamental, actually. It's funny that you start there because I think in leadership, in teams, in high performance, as a parent, there's this tension, isn't there, between creating a supportive environment and a place where people feel safe and like you're on their team and they can say whatever they like and, they can mess up and you've got their backs. But also, there needs to be a level of stretch there, and there
Mm,
needs to be a level of challenge there, and there needs to be a level of discomfort, even outside of your comfort zone, for anyone to grow, whether it be a leader, or a team, or a child. And I find that to be the constant art. Is like because I started, 20 years ago, and the first 15 years of my career, I was pretty much just working with teams on the psychological safety bits, building trust, collaboration. And I enjoy that. I'm a warm fella and I like people getting along.
yeah.
But then I got exposed, about 8 years ago, actually, to really senior teams. I was struck by the atmosphere, and the atmosphere was not harmonious. We're talking about high performing teams. They had to be on their A game. They were sitting upright. They were leaning forward, and they knew that they had to be at their best because you were going to hold me accountable if I wasn't,
Mm.
and you were going to try to make me the best I can possibly be, and likewise. And we disagreed quickly, and not personally. All that good stuff. And so I think empathy with edge sums up a lot of things. I try to develop a really strong bedrock of trust and relationship and humanness, if you like. But I also like to punch and to say stuff which people are not going to hear outside of that coaching context.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that phrase you used is disagree quickly but not personally, because that's what we have seen with high performing teams is that they really can have those robust conversations and then move on.
Yes. And it's just like, we never question that we're not shoulder to shoulder looking in the same direction. We just say, no, I see it completely differently. I understand where you're coming from. You're saying this. I see it completely differently.
Mm.
And it's just light and it's fine. And we disagree. And then what are we going to do? I can say, who's got the best idea? Let's figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it takes a degree of self-awareness to be able to do that. And that's why I think understanding self is the most important thing that leaders can do, because then they know what to dial up and dial down. So, what do you think is the biggest challenge that leaders in today's workplace climate have to deal with? Some of the big ones.
I mean, I think it's what all of us are struggling with at the moment, maybe. I don't want to speak for everybody, but certainly everyone in my world is just the pace of change.
Mm,
You know, it's just one thing after another. Both of us live near the beach, Jan, and it's like one wave after another. You get knocked over and you get up and it knocks. And so as a leader, that's kind of amplified because you're dealing with complexity. You're dealing with lots and lots of different leaders and lots of different people, personalities and, options, and trying to find a way of coming up with a strategy that makes sense and that will make sense in 3 months in an environment that's constantly changing
mm,
is tricky, And what worked up until now for a lot of leaders, and I think something really changed around sort of COVID, and the world changed, of course, but a lot of leaders were successful up to that point, and now they're just looking at the toolkit going, it's just not working anymore. I don't know what it is. These were working before, and
mm,
these tools are no longer working. So
mm,
what do I do now?
mm.
You know?
Yeah. Because I think people also got a taste of autonomy, like not having to come in to be able to do their work away. And, a lot of leaders were able to lead by physically seeing people and, having that walk around and things like that. So it actually did have to open up another skill set for leaders.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely. And to your point about the pace of change and, strategy, now is it relevant in 3 months' time? That's where this opportunity of diversity and having those robust discussions come into it, So if you are,
Flexibility,
mm,
agility.
mm,
Sorry to cut you off, but exactly that. Nothing stays the same anymore. You can't sort of, you know, what you did 6 months ago is not going to work. So you have to be an expert at adapting. I keep thinking of Madonna, she reinvents herself, right? Or she did through our generation.
mm,
And leaders almost have to be like that. It's like, okay, 3 years in, who am I gonna be this year?
mm,
How am I gonna dial my essence up in a particular direction or dial a particular aspect of me down to fit the circumstances now? Because things
yeah.
are changing so quickly.
So let's kind of like pull the curtain back in the coaching, right?
Mm.
So what are you seeing in your coaching that leaders are coming to you for? Like, what are their issues and challenges? What is it that they're actually looking for?
So a lot of it is related to culture.
Mm,
And, that you talked about autonomy. I mean, people have more autonomy now. People have had a chance to reflect, you know, there's been an awakening in a way, hasn't there? And so leaders are basically facing cultures which are not engaged in the way that they were. They're not retaining people the way that they were. People aren't in ruts. They've risen out of the ruts and they're looking left and right. They've got options here, you know? And so in a sense, they're just, they're coming to people like myself, I think, and going, well, you know, if the economy's, not looking great, and if inflation's not looking great, and you could list off another 10 things like that to be worried about, how do I strengthen my culture for what's coming? You know, now, what do I do? How do I, what does that even look like
mm,
in this modern age?
mm,
And
yeah.
particularly, the new and emerging leaders. So those frontline leaders, first time managers, or a couple of rungs above, generally sort of like, what would they be? 30, 35,
Mm,
that kind of age.
mm,
How do we engage them? Because most of the people that I'm coaching are about 55 or even 60, and they lived through a different world, you know. And it definitely feels like there's a cultural gap
mm.
between those generations.
Oh, absolutely. Because even even now, when we're seeing how open young ones are, like even young leaders, like they share so much more than perhaps their, elder counterparts. And they are a lot more impatient. They want things to happen sooner. And when we've got working in these monolith, like these big organizations that have to actually go through all this hierarchy, it really is stifling for people who want a meaningful input. They want their work to be meaningful for them. And
Yes.
so as a leader, how do you do that? And again, like you were saying, it's a new skill set. So if we're thinking about, we know that there is a problem around culture and how to engage, etc. What are some of the skills you think that leaders need to be thinking about and dialing up?
So I think they need to be great coaches, but I would say that, wouldn't I? Because I think coaching is a superpower, and I don't think you need to be a coach to have good coaching skills. I mean, what do people want, especially the younger generation, as I understand it anyway, and I've got younger members on my team, who I was just having a debate about, actually. I'm sort of thinking about it. Maybe I'll share it with you, but they want to be listened to. They
Mm.
want to be understood. Like they want to have someone there who is genuinely interested in who they are, what makes them tick, what their passions are, what their dreams are. And look, the best way of engaging an individual or a group of people is to figure that out and to find roles that allow them to express themselves and achieve their dreams and express their individuality within that role in such a way that it's got an organizational benefit. I mean, if you can line up your personal motivations with an organizational motivation, then that's the way to do it. Now, how do you do that at scale? I mean, how do you create a culture where at the top you're creating 100 leaders or 1,000 leaders who are all skilled at doing that? That's a very different place to work.
Mm.
In fact, I think this is hearsay, but you'd have to check this. But I think Canva,
Mm.
the
Yep.
organization, yeah.
Mm.
So I think they've actually done away with the word leader, and they actually have replaced it with coaches. So they have
Ah, right,
coaches.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I
And
mean, just being a coach, there are so many skills in that skill set. And I remember, doing my coaching accreditation like, oh God, nearly 20 years ago or something now. But, the top three was listening,
Mhm.
questioning, and the ability to acknowledge. And
Mm,
whenever we run a leadership course, they're the three top skills. Like we've got about 7 key communication skills, but they're the top three
sure,
and most people don't know how to listen.
sure.
And it's something that everyone can, start to do, more of. It's just that we're not taught how to listen. We're kind of like just talking until someone stops and then we can kind of like say our thing, like it really does take a lot of energy and intention to listen deeply. And if you're an extrovert and someone says to you, gee, you're a really good listener, like, take that as a real big tick. You've obviously
Yeah,
been working on yourself. Yeah. Okay. So what I often hear, especially for new and emerging leaders, is this thing called, and even senior leaders really, this thing called imposter syndrome, where they don't think that they are good enough. And so there are certain, perfectionistic behaviors that then are displayed because of that. And as we know, that can lead to some really detrimental impacts on the team. Do you come across that at all in your coaching?
yeah. I'm coaching someone, well, 2 people at the moment who have used that terminology. I find it one of the most difficult things, if I'm honest, to coach around because I think it's fundamental, and you're bordering on kind of going into therapy,
Mm.
to address confidence issues or imposter syndrome. So I kind of, it's not, I'm open to suggestions around this, but one of the ways that I've found, which is just very simple and pragmatic, is to explore with them how they would be behaving different if they were confident, not full of bluster, not the person who's beating their chest and look at me, but genuine, deep groundedness. That really rock solid sense of self. I ask them, what would you be doing differently? What would you be doing less of, more of? how would you be approaching this situation? And really just get them to sort of paint that picture and imagine themselves doing that. And they may actually come up with some actions from that place that they wouldn't have thought of otherwise. And so then you've got them doing things, behaving particular ways that they wouldn't otherwise. And in a sense, you start to feel confident if you're doing those things. So rather than going back to childhood and sort of doing all psychoanalysis, I think that's like a fast track way. It's a bit of a cheat, but I do think what you build up is you build up in a set of, experiences and successes that are in your head, and the more that builds up a bank of things like, this is who I am, I'm this type of person. Even if you don't always feel it, it's like, well, the behavior seems to indicate that I'm that person, so I must be,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah, you're applying the proof point, that
Yeah.
this is actually what someone who doesn't have imposter syndrome would doing. The other thing about that is you're inviting people to give themselves feedback. And maybe that's another step is if you think you are an imposter, get feedback. So find out the impact that you are having on others, because then again, you're getting another tangible piece of data for you to work with. And
Yes.
so from that point of view, have you got any suggestions about how people can, I don't know, ask for feedback or even give feedback?
Yeah. I mean, this is fundamental, isn't it? And I agree with you around the feedback point. It's probably worth saying too that I think a lot of people who think they have imposter syndrome maybe actually just have an accurate self-perception. And maybe, there is a gender difference here,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believe. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
you hear about imposter syndrome a lot more in women than you do in men.
Mm.
And women, I think, is established, tend to have a better, more accurate self-representation than men. We don't often hear about people coming to coaching and saying, I've got a completely unrealistic, confident attitude about myself, and I need some coaching to have a more realistic. But actually, there's probably more of them, and maybe we should be doing more of that as opposed to but that's not a matter. So feedback, how to give and receive feedback. So I've done a lot of this, and I did sort of executive assessments, which was terrifying when I was young. God, and you're sent into this room to someone who's 20 years older than you, and you've got to give them this feedback saying stuff they've never heard about
Yeah.
themselves.
Right.
And I just sort of through trial and error and some pretty big errors came up with a couple of things. So one is to always, always, always ask permission first.
Mm.
So Jans, there's some stuff which I've noticed, which I kind of want to share with you, but I don't really know if you want to hear it because it might be tough. It might sting a bit. So if you want, I just won't share that bit, almost take it away and just leave it hanging and let them say to you, no, 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 no. I want to hear it. Okay, okay, okay. So that's one part. The other part is have to have positive intent.
Mm.
If you feel in any way that there's something off in this relationship, you're judging this person, you don't really like them,
Mm.
it's not going to land well. You have to love them. You have to want the best for them.
Mm.
And if it comes from that place, then again, it would likely be received in the right way. And then, of course, the simple ones would just be specific. So make it about behavior as opposed to the person. Saying you're lazy is not going to go down well, but saying, when you leave the meeting 10 minutes early each time, the impact on, what do you think the impact on the team is? What do you think they think of you? And have it be a conversation too, as opposed to just a one-way diatribe.
Mm.
And then in the end, ask them, what they got from it,
Mm.
So I think it's light. It's just a conversation, it's with positive intent and you ask for permission.
Mm. I love
And there's
that.
also a skill to receiving feedback as
Yes.
well, which is basically just don't take it personally because most people give feedback terribly. Just know it's going to be delivered terribly and just assume positive intent. That's all you can do. Just
Yeah.
like, thank you. That's all you say. Don't even respond. Yes or no. I agree. I disagree. Don't.
Mm.
Thank you.
Mm,
Thank you
lovely.
very much.
Lovely. Because as a feeler, when we say don't take it personally, we will take things personally. That's
Of
what we
course we
do as
do.
feelers. However, when we know that, people like just to have the highest, I don't know, thought about the reason why people are giving you feedback. And I love that. Just thank you is enough.
Yeah.
And often Michelle and I, if we're doing a workshop, this is my twin sister who we're in business together. Sometimes I'll say, oh, can I give you some feedback? And she's, well, no, not today. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You've got to
that's
be
right.
ready to
Yeah.
receive it,
Yeah.
So there is
Don't
that.
feedback all over me.
Mm,
Right? It's
mm,
like, when it actually feels like that sometimes. Like
mm.
you're feedbacking all over me. Go away. You know?
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah. So have you ever had to coach someone who wanted to give their boss feedback?
Absolutely. I
Right.
do that all the time. It's part
Right.
of the process actually. So the process is that we encourage that the boss is involved, that actually the boss attends session 2 or session 3, or the coachee to share with them what they want to get out of the coaching program, to get feedback, but also to really transform that relationship as well.
Mm.
And even if you see this person every day, when you've got a coach third party in a conversation, sort of facilitating, it's a very different thing. People sort of almost see themselves through somebody else's eyes, through an independent person's eyes, and they behave in a different way. They be more vulnerable sometimes, mostly more authentic. And so the opportunity there is really to transform that relationship and have it be a two-way conversation about how to maximize that relationship. And then we get the boss back at sort of session 6, 7 to review the progress, to discuss what the gaps are, the remaining gaps, and next steps.
Mm. Yeah, I like that. I like that involving them in the whole process, because
Yeah.
then you can really understand how you are going to meet those expectations and also the opportunity to share what is going on for you.
Yes.
If you needed to actually give feedback to your boss, having a third party there, I think
Yeah.
that's a nice, safe way of doing it as well.
Yeah,
For some
exactly.
people, yeah, they've got that support. So us talking about the different working environment and people wanting, more autonomy, what we are finding is people are working more and more from home, and organizations culturally have to contend with, do we have a blanket, policy, or do we do it, person by person? And this is what makes a culture as well, the
Mm,
decisions that
mm.
they make. What do you think leaders need to do differently to manage a hybrid team?
Look, I can only speak to my experience, Jen, as a coach and as a team coach, which is a blended approach. I mean, I in my personal experience, it's not one or the other. I do I would feel uncomfortable working with a team if it was all virtual. So if it was, say, 3 2-day workshops over a year, and I work with teams all over the world. So I work with teams in the US and the UK, and sometimes, 2 out of 3 workshops I might run virtually. And then, but at least once a year, I think it's really important to get them into a room for 2 days.
Mm,
And I mean, everybody knows it's a hassle, it's costly, but it's different, you
mm,
know,
mm,
it's just different.
mm.
So I don't think anything can replace that in terms of what I do, and the nuance that you get from being in a room with somebody, complexity, but geez, what an amazing thing to be able to coach people from, our houses, who are in America or in England or whatever.
Mm, yeah. I know. I've found over the years, though, one of the most impactful coaching sessions I had was over the phone, where we didn't even see each other or anything like that. It was just total deep listening.
Mm,
And so, but yes, I think you do have to have a breadth, especially if you're
mhm,
leading other people and things like that. And then sometimes you just have to pull out skills that you normally would use face to face and then ramp them up. Like really notice the body language, notice what's in the background, have a conversation with that, checking in with them, those. And that's what we found during COVID. The teams who still did the check-ins, still kind of like
Right.
ran their meetings and connected were the ones who really were able to navigate, COVID. So what is one of the best pieces of advice as you've been given, and how do you apply it?
What is the best piece of advice I've been given? I've been given so much good
Or one,
advice.
one of the best.
Oh, okay. So I think my my lovely old man, who is sadly fading away with Alzheimer's, which is very sad, but he was very, very wise. And he used to say that life's full of problems, you know. So don't ever get into that trap of trying to eliminate problems from your life. Just choose really good ones, Amos, because if you're going to have problems, you may as well have really good ones. So, yeah, among those, he would call, kids. Kids are a great problem to have. A wife is a great problem to have. A long-term partner.
Mm.
A career that's difficult, but you love it deeply. You care about it, and but it's hard. That's a good problem to have. Suing your neighbor because their tree is leaning on your fence, maybe not so good.
Mm.
you know. And I thought that was very good. So
I love that. It's just looking at it from a different perspective. And as coaches, that's what we're always inviting our clients to do, isn't it? Like broaden that perspective. So, Amos, if people wanted to find you, where would they, if they wanted to start a conversation or find out what you're doing, what's the best
oh,
place?
so I actually run a large coaching practice in Australia called People Max, and I've been talking as an individual coach today, but we've got over 40 coaches across Australia and New Zealand, and we do loads of different stuff, from women in leadership programs to resilience workshops, to culture change, to leadership developments, team stuff. So that's kind of my day job. And I don't do a whole lot of coaching anymore, but if people want to get me, what's the best place? Probably peoplemax.com.au or amosszeps.com.
Beautiful. And also LinkedIn. So
Yeah.
I know you've got a LinkedIn profile as well, because
Yeah.
I tapped on that. Yeah, great. And
Yeah.
we'll put that link in the notes as well. So
Fantastic.
to round off this conversation, Amos, is there anything
Mm.
else that you would like to share before we wrap up?
No, I just wanted to say it's lovely to meet you, and it's always good to have these conversations. I find it really energizing. I was
Yeah.
at the end of the long day, and I was like, coming onto this, have a cup of coffee. And I'm like, I've got more energy now than when I started. So thank
Yeah,
you.
lovely. Yeah, and thank you. And it's always good to hear another coach to see how similar we are, but the way in which we execute is going to be very different. And so we're going to be attracted to different clients, and clients are going to be attracted to us. But, our whole premise is to, like, see the best, you know what I mean, in people that we coach, and have that intent, which I
Mm.
love. I love the whole coaching fraternity. So it's been a pleasure. It really has, Amos. I really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll stay in touch.
Thanks very much, Jen.
Thanks, Amos. Bye.
Have a good one. Bye.